Hello, welcome to the June 8th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and we'll make sure everything's going okay. Hello, welcome to the... All right, everything sounds fine there. We will go ahead and get started here in just a few minutes. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could simply ask questions in the chat field. We'll try to go through the questions chronologically. People's abilities to ask questions can far exceed my ability to answer them in a real-time manner. So at some parts during the live stream, I may be 30 to 40 minutes behind the questions. We'll try to get through as many questions as completely and as succinctly as possible. So if we could try to, when you ask questions, some things that can help the whole process is if we could indicate sometimes which version of Cubase. You know, I'm running Cubase 11 Pro on Windows 10 or Cubase Elements 10.5 on Mac OS Big Sur, stuff like that. So Cubase version in OS, that information is helpful. And also, if we could try to refrain, if you don't get an immediate response from asking the same question repeatedly, that would just make the ability to answer more questions. So that will allow us to do that. So we get through more topics. We will try to have a index of all of the topics covered in today's live stream, posted and pinned to the top of the comments field later this evening. So maybe 3 or 4 hours after the live stream. If you want to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan has created a website where you could just simply search for topics that have been covered in live streams. So you could use that as a resource in addition to the Steinberg YouTube channels. One other great resource of information that's available is also with the Cubase Nation Discord. So, and we see Jazz Dude helps to put that together. That's always wonderful. And we also have moderation by Agent K. So just wanted to give a special thanks to all those people that help kind of build the community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you are watching the live stream, if you're doing this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us who you are and where you're from. And also if this is your first live stream. As the live stream goes on, I do have my family at home during the pandemic, so I may get interrupted by my son. You may hear my wife working directly above me while she's on her conference call, so I'll apologize for any interruptions. We'll try to keep those to a minimum. Also, we usually do these live streams on Tuesdays and Fridays. So this Friday, I have some stuff to do with my son's school. It's his last day of school. So we'll move the live stream to the same time on Saturday. So we'll do a special Saturday live stream. So if you know people that maybe haven't been able to watch because of a work commitment or a schedule conflict, and so let those people know that we'll be doing kind of a special Saturday live stream, and that will be I believe June 13th. So instead of Friday, we'll be doing Saturday. So let's go ahead and take a quick look and see who is on the live stream. And please feel free, if this is your first live stream, let us know if this is the first time you've attended. If you haven't subscribed to the Cubase YouTube channel, make sure you do that so you get notified of live streams. And if you learn a new tip or trick in the live stream today, make sure you hit the like button. So let's go ahead and check to see who is on the live stream and we'll get started. Okay, so we see Jeff Zabelski, and he was asking before the live stream started, is it too early to hit the like button? No, it's not. So you can hit it before as well. All right, so we see Jazz Dude, we see Agent K on our live stream, as well as Douglas. Okay, so we have Christian D68 from France, Uno Memento from Finland, Robbie Bowling from Dallas. All right, we have Filter Freak from the UK, Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, John Costigan from Kenosha. We have Jan from Cubase Index. All right, we have Tom Morello present in Philadelphia. Michael Pierce from outside of London, Trans 2020. We have Detlef from Dusseldorf. All right. Okay, so we see Mark Rabin's going to be mixing some cover tunes while he's kind of watching in the background. So glad you could join us. All right, Soren from Sweden. All right, so we have a question. Will Steinberg come out with new interface with USB 4, updating whole system soon? So generally, a lot of times when a new interface format comes out, there has to be kind of a controller chipset that's going to be available for that. So USB 4 seems promising, but I haven't heard of any specific plans for a USB 4 audio interface. So it's obviously kind of a lot of transitions, but I think it's incredibly promising technology. So I'm looking forward to getting. I just got a new computer with USB 4 on it, so I want a new USB 4 interface as well. So, but nothing that's been announced publicly. All right, so we have the Monk Beach checking in from Italy, and occasionally my chat field will have to be refreshed. I may lose a question or two, so I'll apologize in advance for that. Okay, so we have Moorish Jedis, the first time checking out a stream from the beginning. Very excited, from Atlanta, Georgia. All right. All right, so we have Glenn Dozier from Suffolk, Virginia, so a fellow Virginian. Great to see you on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question from Michael. Hi, Greg. What is? Hope all is well. What is the easiest way to add swing to a MIDI track? So let's go ahead and just come over here. Let's do. I'll just start with a particular project here that I know. So, okay, so there's a number of different ways of adding swing. So I'll just load up a quick project with the drum part. Okay, so let's say if I just wanted to add a little bit of swing on a particular drum event here, I will just find, let's say, just quick hi-hats. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of paint in some hi-hats here. Let me just turn my snap on, sorry. Now make more sense. All right, so let's say I just want to put in something, and this is always like kind of one of the dead giveaways is hi-hats. Okay, so let's say if I just wanted to take this particular phrase, and we'll listen to just our hi-hats here. Okay, so if I wanted to do swing, there's a couple of different ways we could do it. One is just within, let's say if we have the quantize panel here, you could actually just add your swing amount directly from within the quantize panel. So let's set this to maybe 70%. And then you could just come over here and apply the quantize, and we'll see the notes kind of shift. And if you wanted to adjust that even higher, we could adjust different amounts. So say 90%, so you could hear different swings. So let's say at this point, let's apply the quantize to 90%. Another method that you could use just from the quick project window. So if we just go back straight to our 16th notes here, and I'll just put this into a quick loop. One of the tricks you could do is there's a quantizer plugin in MIDI. So if we go to the MIDI inserts, you could go to quantizer, and you have a swing factor here. So you could just, and that doesn't actually change the note placement, but you could actually just kind of change the swing feel directly of that. And if you wanted to embed that into the part, you could just go to your MIDI and choose to freeze MIDI modifiers, and now you could actually see how the swing is applied to the part. So those are two quick ways. One is, again, just by using the MIDI, the quantizer plugin, and adjusting your swing there, or being able to just set your swing amount here in a quantize swing and be able to just apply that quantize directly from the quantize inspector in the MIDI editors. Okay, and my chat fields just re-jumped on me, so let me just... Okay, so we have a question from Jeff Pearson. I have an issue with the mix window where the main faders are missing, but they are there in other mixer views. So if we have, let's say, your mix console here, okay, it says where the main faders are missing, but they are there in other mixer views. So if we wanted to, so we see all of our different tracks here. If we go to the visibility tab, we could come over here and hide a number of different channels. So we could have different visibility tabs. But if I go to my mix console can have its own independent visibility tabs. So even if I'm in, so I could see like all of these in this mix console. So all these tracks, my audio 1 through 8 are visible in this mix console, but in this mix console, they're not. So each mix console can have independent visibility settings. So just from the inspector, click on visibility and then make sure that there's a check mark next to all the tracks in that particular mixer view, whether it's a lower zone or one of the 3 mixer views. Okay, so we have a question. I rescued my old audio card, Layla 24. Its drivers are working with the latest Win 10 and with Cubase 11. Do you think I could add the same system, Behringer UMC 1820, and work with that both at the same time? So generally, you could use one audio interface. Yeah, I remember the Layla 24s. I remember when, the Echo, the Darla, Gina, Layla interfaces were all introduced. So those kind of exciting times. But generally, you could only, if you wanted to use multiple audio interfaces, depending on your operating system. So ideally, the 2 interfaces won't clock together. And that's kind of the problem, that they could both play audio, but they could have independent latency, and they could have, their clock between the 2 sources aren't going to be synchronized. So, if you have audio interfaces that are designed where you could run multiple interfaces, like in my studio, I still have MR816s, a Steinberg audio interface, and I could run 3 of those units stacked together, and it's designed to do that. But there are a couple workarounds, and they can be less than satisfactory if you need to do it like in an emergency pinch for tracking. You could try on a Windows platform to use ASIO for all and be able to use the ASIO for all driver, and then add the different audio interface ports, and that's kind of running it under a unified Windows driver. And on a Mac platform, you could use an aggregate device that you could set up in the audio MIDI setup. But generally, it's going to give you less than satisfactory result, often combining the latency of both interfaces. So you're better off kind of utilizing one particular interface, and if you need it to expand, to purchase an interface that has expansion via ADAT light pipe or AES EBU. So. All right, so we have Denny Tom from India. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question. How do you lower the volume in the middle of a sound? So there's a couple ways you could do this. One is you could just select an event here. So if I wanted to do just lower the volume here, so there's a couple approaches. So I'm going to hit Shift plus X, and that will split the event. So now as I play, I could just adjust the volume doing clip gain directly there. So that will be pre-fader. If you want it to be tied into automation, you could also just open up the automation lane by clicking in the lower left-hand corner of the track, grab the range selection tool, and say, I just want my automation to drop on this particular phrase or word in a vocal. So if you wanted to just come right here, say, okay, this was too loud. At that point, I could just grab from the top center and adjust automation. You could also just select a particular phrase, go to processes in the audio menu, and you'll see gain. So I'll just do new version, and here I can say I want this down, let's say minus 12 dB, and that will just process that one particular phrase down. One other method that could be a little less than scientific is just by grabbing the pencil tool on the waveform part, and you could just say, okay, I want this to be down, and I want it to go up, and you could have your gain adjustment directly there as well. So there's 4 ways of being able to adjust the volume in a particular, for just a particular section. Okay, so we have questions. Greetings from North Carolina. Is there a way to save presets in a different specific folder? Thanks. So we generally, like when we save presets, it's saved to kind of a common folder so that it can be accessed by other Cubase versions, and it can be kind of independent of the particular file. So let's say if I wanted to come and we'll save this as a track preset in this particular track. So I'm going to come and we will just save a track preset. And here we could give it like a new folder if you wanted to, but it's going to be kind of stored directly in. So I'll just call this okay, so now I'll just hit OK. So generally it's going to be stored. So this way it knows it's going to be kind of in a user preset. We go to track presets, to audio, and then we could see that particular folder there. Now these presets could be manually moved, but at that point, if you, that could lead to the program not knowing where the user defined presets are. So it kind of saves it here. If you wanted to put it into a way to transfer it to another computer, you could take any of your user presets and export them from a profile manager. And then that could be migrated to other computers. But the intention is that it's going to be saved in kind of an application independent folder, so that all of the different presets, if you upgrade from Cubase 10.5 to 11, that all those presets, it knows where to look for them. So it kind of consolidates that. But you could physically, manually move them if you wanted to. Okay, so we have a question. How does one automate tempo changes in Cubase? Also, do you have any tips for a tempo track and or markers? So if we have a tempo track, let's see if we have one. I'm going to right click and we could add a tempo track. And what we want to do is to make sure that with the tempo track, we could have the tempo track kind of follow just a static tempo, and usually it'll default to 120 beats a minute, or we could have the tempo track follow different tempo changes. So once we have our tempo changes here, we could just draw in your tempo changes. We could choose whether you want these to ramp up or if you wanted them to step, so that you could just come right over here and say at this point we need it to be that tempo. So that's how you could do different kind of tempo manipulation. So you could choose, and you also have automatic, which will keep it into the same value as it was previously. Now, if we wanted to do, so the second part of the question, do you have any tips for using a tempo track and or markers? So so those are, some things you could do for tempo tracks. If you wanted to, raise or lower the tempo proportionally, or if you wanted to, at this point, say, I wanted to make the tempo less extreme, or if you wanted to tilt tempo, you could do those types of manipulation of your tempo data. And with marker track, so as we drop in markers, and you have like single point markers, and you could also drop in cycle markers. So if I have a range selected, we could choose, okay, I just wanted to come here. Let's add a cycle marker. And that will follow the left and right locators. So if I move to here, I could just add a cycle marker, and let's move my left and right locators to that range selection, add a cycle marker. So once I have this done, you could go to your marker windows. I think it's just Command or Control plus M. Nope. Sorry. So I'll just select, let's say, my marker track here. And then when we go to the marker track, we could actually just come right over here. And here, if you wanted to type in descriptions for the markers, you could do that. And you could actually have up to 10 different marker tracks active at once. So hopefully that'll give you some ideas. You could colorize the marker tracks independently, and if you wanted the marker track to always kind of stay at the top, we could just activate the divide track list feature right here, and now I could move this into the upper zone, so my markers can always be visible as I scroll up and down to my different projects. So I just see from Robbie Bowling, did you have to order the computer with USB 4? I haven't seen one in stock yet, even though that's where I desire looking forward. So yeah, my interface was set up for my motherboard. It was an Asus motherboard. I don't know the model number off the top of my head, but it had Thunderbolt 4 and USB 4 on the motherboard as kind of part of the motherboard. So you can get them now. Okay, we see a question from John Costigan. I have a drum sample set with left and right hand snare hits. Should I simply use D1 and E1 for the note assignments? Thanks, Greg. So there's a couple of different ways. You could definitely do that, John, but if we wanted to take a look, if you wanted to just have kind of like a natural variation, you could do some other little tricks that might help. So let's say if I go to my instrument here and I'll just cut the kit here. So let's say if we're starting with a brand new instance of Groove Agent without anything loaded, I will go find some snare samples. Okay, so I'll take Okay, so I'm just going to drag this to D1 and let's take this snare. So I could put both of these samples kind of on the same pad if you want. So now when we go to edit, we just So at this point, if you wanted to just kind of do like a round robin, so you could, as we take, multiple samples over, I'll just do it from another source here quickly. I'll show you with. So let's say here I have 3 kicks, and if I wanted to alternate those, I could drag them all onto a pad. And if you now at this point, we could have this kind of vary by velocity, but so we have like 3 different samples here, but if we wanted to, we could just choose, instead of switching by velocity, just to do a round robin, and that will, every time that you hit the snare, it will just kind of cycle between the 2 different samples. So that's one method of doing it, but you could just put the 2 snare samples on different notes and be able to kind of trigger those just, as easily. But if you needed to do it on one particular sound, one particular note, you could do that as well. All right, just reading through comments. Okay, so we see from Christian D68, what can I do to always have the drum editor open when I click on a drum track? From the moment it always opens up the normal notes editor. So as soon as we have, close this out. So as soon as it is assigned and has a drum map to the part, so let's say I will add a Groove Agent track here. And I'll just quickly load up. Okay, so let's say I have my drum kit here. So now when I double click on a part, it'll take me into kind of a piano key roll editor. If there is a drum map, and you could just load up a general MIDI map, or if you have Groove Agent, you could just say create drum map from instrument. So now that there's a drum map that's been assigned to the event, well, now when I double click, it will automatically go directly into the drum editor. And there's a preference if you wanted to change that behavior. I think it might be under. But there's a preference. Let me just see if I could. So under editors, you can say use drum editor when drum map is assigned. So that's the default state of that. So as soon as a drum map is assigned to it, which is always a good thing, and even if you don't have something, just assign a GM map to it. And then when you double click, it'll launch directly into the drum editor. Or you see Jeff Sabelski took advantage of the Nuendo upgrade promotion, so that's great. Okay, so we have a question. Can we use the logical editor to create a humanized playing space between MIDI notes after we put together a progression using the chord track? So you could use a logical editor, but there's another method that you could use for this as well. So let me just revert this. Okay, so I will. Okay, so I'm just going to enter in chord track here. Okay, and I think question is if we drag these over. So, we could just, if you go into one of the tabs, you'll have as a MIDI modifiers. And here you could choose to randomize the position of notes. So we could say, okay, I just want to randomize the position here. So say do 64 and minimum value. Or we'll do this maybe a little higher. So that's one method of, adjusting kind of the position on playback. So let's say if I wanted to glue these all together, I'll hold down my Alt key and I could glue all the different parts together here if I use the right modifier key. Okay, so now if I go over here to my freeze MIDI modifiers, we can see that the position of some of the notes has changed. If we wanted to do it within the MIDI logical editor, I think we could set that up too. So we could say type is equal to note, and we want to adjust maybe the length of notes. So we could say we wanted these to be, let's say less. And you can do this in samples, frames, or PPQ. So at this point, if I just wanted to, adjust the length, less of notes, we could do that. But you could also kind of, if we say, let's transform and I want it to take notes, and we'll take the position of notes and set to relative random values, between 20 and 80. You could adjust stuff like that as well. So, so once you kind of say, I want to take the notes, you could adjust the position, you could adjust the length to relative random values and set the in and out points and kind of experiment with the different values. And that should allow you to have some randomized parts if you just drag it down from a chord progression. Okay, great to see Sable Winters on the live stream. All right, so I just see a question. Greg, what is VST Cloud tab in Cubase? I've never seen that tab in my Cubase. So it could be, if you don't see it, the VST Cloud is where we could do VST Connect and VST Transit. So that's where you could actually get to, collaboration for remote recording with someone, and also for project collaboration where you could share the project or different aspects of the project here with VST Transit. So if you have Cubase Artist or Elements or some of the earlier versions, you may not see that. So it could be, I'm not sure if the versions below Cubase Pro, like Artist, Elements, AILE, would have the VST Cloud menu, but that's what the VST Cloud is for. Okay, so a question. I'm using Retrolog, and on the ARP page, I've created an arpeggio pattern as steps. I was expecting the steps to go with the chords, but the arpeggiator isn't taking into account the chords. Okay, so let's, I'll just add an arpeggiator. Okay, so I think I understand. So let's come over here to the VST instrument, and we'll set Retrolog. Okay. All right, so let me get a sound. It's just find a quick patch that'll make sense. Okay, so let's say if I now want to, so we'll have the chord track output to that, and let's go ahead and open up the arpeggiator. Okay, so it's okay, so it seems okay. So it just says I'm using Retrolog, and on the art page, I've created an arpeggio pattern as steps. So I was expecting the steps to go with the chords, but the arpeggiator isn't taking into account the chords. So it seems like it's kind of working as expected here. So when I'm I'll just try again. So I'll just put this in. So as we play now. So one thing to check that just kind of crossed my mind is to make sure that the actual patch that you're using, a lot of Retrolog patches will be set up as monophonic voices. So like this voice that have set up here is just is a monophonic voice. So if you have just, make sure that when we go back to the actual preset here, that it's not in monophonic mode. So let's say if I play this now, we'll go back to the arpeggiated section and I'll just get to some of the dance arps. But this patch itself, so depending on the arpeggiator and the patch, so make sure that if you're doing that, that it's going to take the chord that's playing in and use that as the basis for the notes, that can use that as the basis for the pitches of the arpeggiator. So let me know if that makes sense, if that answers your question. So first, make sure that it's not a monophonic voice, and realize that the chords that you're going to use are often, depending on how the arpeggiator is set up, it may just cycle between the notes of the chord, but maybe not play the chords. So it might just arpeggiate the chords instead of playing back 3 notes at once. Okay, so question. Please, Greg, could you do a tutorial about creating panels for controlling external instruments? Just what can tell in a few minutes here about this amazing feature. All right, so let's say if I wanted to build a control panel for an instrument. So let's go to our studio setup, and let's go to our MIDI port setup. So let's go to our studio menu. All right, so I'm gonna go to my, let's see, it's not there. Might be under more options. Okay, so let's go to your MIDI device manager. All right, so let's say at this point, I want to install a device. So I'm going to just define new, and you could have, this is where you could get patch scripts for different devices. So I'm going to say, let's define new, and what MIDI channels do I want this to be used for? So let's come over here, and we'll hit OK. Okay, we're gonna give it a name. Sorry, so let's we'll call it Monk Beats. You have an instrument, a synthesizer you've inspired. Okay, and I want to define my MIDI output port. Okay, and then I think if we choose to open device, we'll select our channel here, and then let's see if I remember how to do this. We did this a couple months ago on a live stream, but I had studied before. Okay, so I want to add a panel, and we could have the panel be kind of a generic size. Let me just... Okay, and this is one I had kind of set up. So we're going to just choose to go to your device. Okay, so we want to add a panel. We can make it like the size for an inspector or channel strip or generic size. So at this point, I could drag over, let's say, a background if you wanted to. So we could have backgrounds, but we could also just click on, okay, I want faders. And let's say I just want to make kind of a generic. Okay, so I want to click on create, and this parameter, we'll give it a name, and I'll just call this volume. And this is going to actually just spit out MIDI CC7. Okay, so we click on create. And then we hit OK. And let's say I wanted to have this slider. Okay, so, and this, I wanted this to be a filter sweep. Okay, and now I wanted this to be, you know, and we could do this as sysx data, or if you wanted it to be, you know, this is general, let's say this is controller 44 in the instrument, whatever, or 74, whatever particular controller that is. Okay, so at this point, what we want to do is, let's see if I remember how to do this. So we'll save this, and we'll call this under Chris, switch names. So I want to add a MIDI track, and we'll come over here and we'll assign this out to Chris. So we have this defined in our instrument. And now if we go to panels here, we could make sure that's set up for the right MIDI channel. And I'll just check one more time, make sure if there's anything what I forgot to do here. Okay. So this is now almost like our little software editor that we could adjust our different parameters. And let's see if we can get it to show here. So I may have to put it on the right. So I'm just missing one final step. Let me just make sure that I have it set up for the correct. All right, so it's channel 1. Okay. Just try adding one more MIDI track again. And generally what you'd see is kind of the device panel there. And so I'm kind of blanking on the one little last step just to kind of get it in. But that's how you could kind of build a device panel and kind of make your own editors for that. So sorry, I can't remember just that last thing. But if you search to CubaseIndex.com, it might have been about 2 months ago. We kind of did a walkthrough of that. Okay, so let's see. Hi, Greg. I have a problem. Cubase 11 Pro taking time to initializing VST 2.x plugin manager. I mean, what do I have to check to solve this? Thanks. So a lot of times it could be, make sure that when you're doing the initial scan, that, that everything that you have is 64-bit. If you're bridging 32-bit plugins, older 32-bit plugins, that could take longer. But generally, it's kind of, going through and doing an analysis like the first time that you load up a plugin. So you may notice that it's going to stop at one particular plugin, or it could be when it's taking a long time, it could be the next plugin that's failing to load. So those are some of the things to check is, maybe I think you'll find just it's one plugin. It's maybe taking a long time to initialize. But usually the very first time it does it, Cubase will measure the particular latency of each plugin quickly so that it knows how to compensate for any delays imposed by the plugin itself. All right, so we see Captenergy Music. Great to see you. All right, so we see how do you select MSB and LSB in the MIDI channel. So if we wanted to, set it up for bank messages, you could set up, your bank and program changes right here. If you need it to go directly, let's say, into a MIDI list editor, at this point, we could choose to add in controllers and what controller that you want to add in. So if you wanted to just add your MSB, LSB, I'm trying to remember what controller it is, but let's say if I'm so there you could add LSB, and if you wanted to now just 32 maybe, yeah. So you could just kind of, so you want to go to you could just manually insert them into the list editor if you wanted to. That's how a lot of people will put in different LSB, MSB values for hardware instruments. Okay, we have a question. Is there any form of online support for functionality of Cubase where questions can be asked via email or chat? So, depending on what country you live in, different distributors have different support mechanisms. So I know that our US support, I believe, has online chat. I know they do lots of team viewer sessions where they could remotely access your, customer's computer. So, but every distributor will have different support mechanisms, and I'm not familiar with what the other countries, what their support mechanisms are. I'm not on those meetings. Okay. So we have a question. Does anyone know the fastest way to add a strum effect to your MIDI? All right. So let's say if I had let's add a quick guitar part here. So say I want to do like a nylon string. Okay, so let's say, so some of the patches will have it kind of built in, but let's just, So some of them we could just, play a chord. But let's find just a quick one, maybe that. Sorry, I have some MIDI note message where it pulls a B calculator from generic remote. So let's say I have something like that, and I want to now just trigger these chords on that part. So let's say. So, a quick way that a lot of people use is kind of using this tool here. So the trim tool, if you hold down kind of like Alt, I believe it's just Alt, and kind of inverting. And here you could kind of, so just Alt. And you could set kind of the amount. So now as we do this, we can just say. So if you want to do some quick strumming like that, and you could modify it as needed. So once again, just kind of using the trim tool and hold down the Alt key, and then you could just kind of create some pretty easy strums. All right, so a question I've noticed in Windows 10 Cubase 11 Pro, if I click close, then click save and close in the dialog box, there's a high chance of Cubase crashing, but if I manually save, then close, it's fine. So generally, when we have issues like that on closing, it's often going to be related to a third-party plugin that doesn't want to release the memory that it's currently utilizing. So I think if you could probably find it's going to be like 95% of the time, stuff like that is going to be just down to one plugin that's kind of misbehaving. So so give that, I think if you maybe go through, you could see if doing it with all built-in Cubase plugins, if it does it, but generally it's a third-party plugin that's not releasing its memory from the system that could cause a crash when it's trying to close. Okay, thanks for all the great questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button and that you have subscribed to the channel if you haven't done it already. All right, and I just lost my place. So let me just find where I was. Okay, so a question I often get from client stems that are all over the place. How would you go about creating a macro that in one swift motion reorganizes everything to my liking, naming and color scheme, folders, etc.? So there is kind of a one little clever utility. So, once you have kind of a template, set up, it's, and if you have a project, let's say if we have a project that's just kind of like audio files all over the place, and I have, maybe a template that's kind of set up kind of like this, what you could do is take everything that's just kind of a mess here, select your different components and have, your projects open and just be able to drag and drop audio from one project into another. So if you have just kind of a template project or a project that's set up with how everything that you like, just have one messy stems project and just drag them in. And even if it's, something that's dragged in here, you could, and you're probably going to be dealing with time-stamped files. So let's say I just drag it in and it's not in its correct time position. All you'd have to do is come over here to move to, and then you could just choose origin, and that would place it at the correct timestamp position. So once you kind of have the audio, all the files kind of dragged in, maybe into kind of like a known project with your coloring, with, particular processing set up, your groups, just drag the media over to the correct, to kind of like your new project from your messy, unorganized one, and just move it to origin. And that should be a pretty quick way of doing it. And there's also kind of one other little function I think you could do. I think it's from maybe the edit and the functions menu is, you could also, copy something and paste it to the matching track name. So that's a good function to be aware of in situations like that. So if it's bass, you could copy it and then paste it to a bass track or kick, so if you have kind of similar naming conventions, or if you just look at the names, you could have the name set up here, and then you could copy and paste the events, and once again under functions, and you can set up a keyboard shortcut for that, but just paste it to matching track name. And those things should be able to get you there much faster. You see John Costigan saying, think of the like button as a fun little pinata. So that's good. All right. So we see Gareth has joined us for the live stream. Welcome. Glad to have you. Okay. We just see from Peter Lawson. Hi, Greg. I would like to send you an email of a radio ad I did. So you do a review on it in your next session, if that's what you're... If yes, what's your email address? So you could send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So once again, clubcubase@steinberg.de. So just see from Raylene Kid's Diary, I bought Cubase last week in December 2020, but until now I can't do the setting yet. I've created almost 20 songs for the kids channel. I hope I can finish it soon. All right. So we have a question. Hi, Greg. When using the arranger track in Cubase 11, does it automatically crossfade all the clips together when you flatten the arrangement? So there are settings to kind of automatically do crossfades on the tracks. So if you have this on by default, so if we have like two different audio parts, let's say that these are duplicated. So if you come here, just kind of by default, you'll go to the first thing, you'll see this auto tracks, auto fade settings. So if you have auto crossfades kind of turned on by default, that will just kind of do playback crossfade. So this will do kind of a little fade in, fade out. So that should mitigate a lot of the problem. So you could just make sure that you have the auto fade settings kind of activated. And at that point, that will just kind of, anytime that the audio plays, do very, fast fade in and fade out as new audio sections are done. So, but you could also just select a number of different events and just do kind of crossfade, as soon as with the events kind of overlapping, but just, you're probably better with just kind of the playback fade. So you don't see it visually, but it just kind of does it on playback for you. Okay, so you see a question, is this Cubase 10.5? Please answer me. So no, I'm running Cubase 11. You may notice it may say Cubase 10.5 in a particular project because that's may have been where it was created in, but I'm just running Cubase 11.02, so the latest release version. Okay, so we have kind of clarification on the arpeggiator question from Retrolog. So what I meant is that I'm not playing chords in the arp, but single notes, but the note steps sound off in certain chords in the song. Okay, so depending upon the arpeggio that you're using, so let's say... So let's say, if I have this set up for, so I'll just play on this, but if you have the chord set up to, if you have the arpeggio inside of Retrolog, let's say to play, let's say if we change, the pitch to be something else, so let's say if I want it, all right, so it could be, depending upon the actual arpeggiation, that the arpeggiation isn't agreeing or is kind of, doing different, it could be that the arpeggio is going out of key of the particular song, so if you have it set for doing something, let's say we'll just, let's do... so you may have to kind of adjust the arpeggio, and see if we're in. So you can go to kind of chord mode here for the different arpeggios, but some arpeggios may be set up where, as they do just a very, as they do their scales, that the scales may conflict. So so make sure that the arpeggio itself isn't going to be conflicting with the, so you could have arpeggios that are conflicting harmonically with the chord. So you could just kind of check, make sure that that is kind of, being set up correctly with that. So let's say if I come here to... So say, okay, make this a 13. see if we can make this. So as we play the chord, we could just have the pitch kind of change that could conflict harmonically with the chord itself. All right, wonderful to see Steve McRae on the live stream. So, wonderful musician. Sable's calling me a goat again. So, all right. Okay, so we have a question from Jeff Sabelski. Hi, Greg. When there's an arpeggio effect, how can we control fading the arpeggio effect sooner than its cycle finishes? Does it need to be recorded to a track for that control? So let's say if I'll turn this off and I just wanted to use maybe a quick, one of the MIDI inserts. So let's say if I go to, so it could depend upon, let's say if I go to Apache SX. So we could, you could set it up, different arpeggios to have like so to have space at the end. So let's say if I'm here and I was just doing, so let's say I'll just take this and so I'll go ahead and just record. All right, so let's say I have like a bit of an arpeggio here. So if I wanted to do something, let's say I'm just going to use one measure of the arpeggio, and at the end, because you could have arpeggios based on musical phrases as well. So I'm going to delete those particular notes. But when we go to, let's say, the Apache SX and I go to a sequence, I could drag this particular part. So since I'm using kind of this part that has, two measures with space at the end. So it's not going to just play the particular notes of the arpeggio, but it will include the notes that are the rest at the very end of the phrase as well. So it's not continuously playing. So depending how you do the arpeggiation, so if you're using like the Apache SX, that's a good way of doing it when you go into the sequence mode. Okay. Okay. Hello. Is there any shortcut for direct open third-party VST in one click? So let's say if I have an instrument track, I think I have like a towel plugin just as a VST. So let's say if I have this, I think we could just, trying to remember what the keyboard, but there is just an edit VST instruments. There's no difference between third party and included plugins. All right, so I have Command Option Shift V. So it really doesn't matter if it's an included plugin or you know, so say I come here and I just select, so it's just going to be, again, key commands, and then you could just edit VST instrument under the edit menu, and that will just open up any VST instrument. So I think I may have added that particular keyboard shortcut, but the program really doesn't differentiate. It just opens up the instrument on a particular track, whether it's a Steinberg plugin or a third-party one. All right, so we see, does Cubase Pro have a de-breath plugin? So there's not a de-breath plugin, but I did do a macro. Let me see if I have it on here. So it's not a particular plugin for that, but let me just see if I have it. But there is a macro that you could create. All right, and I'll show you this real quick if you wanted to. I'm just going to pull up a quick reference. Hang on just 1 second. This will make it go faster. I just got this question on Facebook yesterday. I sent in a screenshot. Just do this so I don't have to make a bunch of mistakes on it. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to like de-breath a vocal. So I will come over here and I'll just go to a project that has some breaths in it. So a lot of times what you want to do is to leave the breaths in, but kind of minimize them. So I'll do a new macro and I'll just kind of build this for you because I thought I had it in the system, but. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. Let's do macro. I'll go to key commands rather, and now I'm going to make macros. I'm just going to make sure. Okay, so we're going to do a new macro, and I'll just call this minimize breaths. And I'll get the correct keyboard assigned here. Okay, so we're going to call this minimize breaths. And let's add commands. So the first command I want to add is we're going to do locators to selection. And this will assume that we have one preference, like your select events, auto select events is going to be to its default state. So I'm going to add this particular command. Okay, I'll remove that. Okay, and now I want to split range. And then I'm going to switch it to the, so macro is basically a series of keyboard shortcuts. Run. In order. So I'm just going to say, so instead of having to do all these commands one by one, I'll just macro will execute all of these commands for us. Okay, so we're going to auto select the events. Now we're going to move the cursor just one frame up. It's going to be under transport. And then we're going to drop the volume. And we'll do this like 12 times because we're going to drop it down by 12 dB for our breaths. Okay. Then I'm going to reset the state of one of the preferences. And go back to our range tool. Okay, so how this macro will work. So I'll go to my range selection tool. If I did this correctly. And when you start this macro, make sure that under editing, that you have auto select events under cursor kind of disabled. So let's say if I wanted to listen to a vocal track and we have breaths.
We played our records into the night.
So there we could hear kind of a breath coming in. I'll just make this a little larger so we could all see. So if I wanted to just take that, I'm going to take the range tool and just select the breath. And what I want to do now is to run that macro. So we'll just call this minimize breaths. And now that's just taken that particular range and dropped it down 12 dB. So we can have, and I'll just take off my snap.
I turn it up, you wouldn't mind.
So let's say our breath right here. So I'm just going to select that range and execute that macro again. So we'll just come right over here, minimize breaths. So now as we listen to it,
up until now,
take that and one more time, and you can assign a keyboard shortcut for the macro as well if you do this all day long.
up until
So you want the breath in there so it sounds human.
that was okay.
So, but you may not want the breath to be so prominent. So again, just come right over here. Let's minimize the breaths. And as we listen to it now, we can still hear the breaths, but it's going to be just,
Guess all along I was so naive.
so it sounds human, but it doesn't, it doesn't be annoying. So I'll show the macro one more time and I'll leave it up so if people wanted to copy. So we'll just call this minimize breaths. And that's kind of what I did for the macro to create that. All right. Okay. Okay, reading through different comments. All right, so we have Funk Angelus, who's happy he's finally caught a live stream. So, all right, reading through comments. All right, so we have Ed Tankley from Atlanta on his first live stream. Welcome, and feel free to ask any questions. We're glad you can make it. All right, so JVI is joining us. All right, and Sable Winters is finding Cubase 3 very useful for her social media video promos. That's great. Thanks for letting us know. All right, so we have kind of a bad rainstorm going on outside, so hopefully I won't lose power. So I just see a question regarding the app Divisimate. Any plans to implement its abilities directly into Cubase? So I'm not familiar with Divisimate, but if you could let me know what functions Divisimate does, I could do some research on it for next live stream on Saturday. So, but if you let me know what Divisimate is, I'd be happy to try to figure out how to get it going in Cubase if possible. So. Okay, so I have a question. I know this must be asked a lot, but is there a way to create a macro to bypass channel strip, EQ, and the inserts at the same time? I create one, but the channel strip didn't turn on. Okay, it's Cubase 9.5 version 10. So we could come over here, and some of the functions that you could have are, if you wanted to, I'm not sure if you want to do this globally or on an individual track. But if you just wanted to, hold down the Alt or Option key, if you come over here, we could bypass the various parameters. Let me just make sure I'm on the right computer with my keyboard. So as you click up here, you could just bypass like the inserts. But let's see if we could just do it for everything on a particular track and build a macro. just take a look here. Okay, so let's see if we could. Come over here. Let's create a new macro. Okay, so let me make sure. Okay, so let's say if I come here, so we can see kind of all of the different, so I have mute. All right, so here I could just, let's try running the macro here. So we can see that all of it has been kind of just bypassed here. So say as we're playing along.
Guess all along I was so naive. Now you're packing boxes, ready to leave. Our musical history.
So let's come back over here. Let's see if we can just toggle.
I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours.
So it looks like that is. All right, so when we have, let's say, our channel strip here. All right, so now we'll just see our inserts, sends, and channel strip kind of, we should see them all kind of turn yellow. So inserts, EQ, strip, send. So I'll come over here to macros and we'll bypass the processing. All right, so it looks like it's only maybe the channel strip is only for the selected channel. So I'll pass that along, but it looks like maybe the channel strip doesn't kind of work as expected with that. Looks like it's maybe only doing it on the selected. Let me just select this channel and see if the channel strip is functioning. So yeah, it does look like the channel strip is only bypassing on the first channel and not carrying over. So I'll make a point to mention that to the team. Okay, so we have a question. I'm thinking of upgrading from Elements 10.5 to Artist 11. I collaborate with someone that's using Pro 10.5. Will they be able to open files I create or edit? So yeah, they could definitely open up your Elements files without any problems. So, but yeah, so jumping up to Artist 11 would be great. So if you're using, particular 11 functions such as, getting into, plugins that aren't going to be there. At that point, some of the plugins, so if it's stuff like Squasher and, some of they'll get a message saying that they won't be able to be, that plugin won't load up. So as long as you're kind of using the same type of versions, and once you go to Artist 11, you also had the license to run Artist 10.5 and earlier versions of Artist as well. So you could kind of be, at the same level minus a couple of plugins and maybe scoring features and surround sound. Okay, so we have a question. How do you insert a third-party plugin? Whether you insert a third-party plugin or a plugin, you could just come right over here and just choose to insert. So say here I have like a curve EQ from Voxengo. So you could just kind of drag and drop. If you have other plugins, you could also just kind of see them when we go to your VST effects. And, so any plugin that you see here, I don't think I have many third-party plugins, but it's all the same way. And you could just, even just drag and drop your plugins directly onto tracks, and that would load them as inserts. Okay, so Christian is complaining 1 hour now without ice cream. Hopefully things will get better. So yeah, everyone's missing Michael Teams, so hopefully he'll be able to join us. So we just see a comment from Michael Pearson, a question. I did not know that you could drag files between projects like that. Will that also automatically copy files to the new directory too? So it depends on your preference that you have set. So if you have the preference set, Michael Pierce, where you say editing audio, where it says on import audio files, where you just have it... and you have this set to copy all audio files to the project folder. So if that's set when you drag from one project over to another, all you have to do is then at that point, the files will be copied to the project folder's audio folder. So you'll have files in both places. So yeah, you could do that. So it's a great way of kind of consolidating projects. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, what is real-time algorithm has been deactivated because pitch or stretch factor lies outside the limit of the current preset? So anytime that we're working with different audio file algorithms, you'll have different algorithms here. So, and these can be optimized for different, so as we're stretching audio, when we do real-time time stretching of audio, at that point, we could choose different algorithms. And some functions in the program will use, like Vari Audio is going to use standard solo. And that's the algorithm that does all the pitch detection, all the segment detection. So if you try to do something where it's like, okay, I want to go 2 octaves in this particular algorithm, that, it may be out of range, so let's say if you take a sample and you drop it down 2 octaves. So these algorithms, some algorithms could only be optimized maybe for an octave or something like that. So that's why you would get that particular message. So just try switching to a different algorithm, and that would probably just alleviate that message for you. Okay, see a question. Greg, I'm very new and I'm struggling to get signal input from my mic input. Model 12 Tascam to Cubase. Help, please. All right, so I'm going to just take a quick look at the Model 12 to see if it's what I think it is. Maybe like a mixer with a USB output. Let me just, yeah. Okay. So what you want to do is, with a device that is a mixer that does a USB output. So the first thing you want to do is to, make sure that you have, if you're a new person, there's a lot of stuff that, you'll just gain with experience and often just making mistakes and you'll get better at it. But depending on your microphone. So if you have a microphone, make sure that it's an XLR microphone that's plugged right in to the Tascam interface. If it's a USB mic, that's not going to work. So make sure you have an XLR cable going to one of the inputs. Once you have the input defined, if it's a condenser mic, make sure that you have signal on the mixer itself. So you could adjust the gain on the mic preamp, and if you see it on the signal and hear it on the headphone output of the mixer and you're seeing the signal and it looks good, so you could adjust the mic pre-gain and maybe adjust the fader level. If you don't see signal there, if it's a condenser mic, make sure that you activate phantom power. If it's a dynamic mic, you don't have to activate phantom power. But if you don't hear a condenser mic that's plugged in, make sure that the phantom power is turned on. So if you have signal on the Tascam device, and what you need to do now is I'm not sure if the Tascam device does only a stereo output or if it does a multi-track output over USB. So if it does a stereo output, and you're hearing signal in the headphones, but you're not seeing it in Cubase, make sure that we go to your studio setup and that you have under the audio devices, that you have the Tascam selected as your driver. So, and not built-in audio, not ASIO, not, generic low latency. You should have a dedicated ASIO driver here. So that tells Cubase that it's looking for audio from your Tascam interface. At that point, we could go to your connections. So we go to your studio menu to audio connections. We go to inputs. You want to add a bus. By default, it'll probably be a stereo in, stereo out. There, you want to tell what input from your audio interface, the Tascam 12, or what input is actually being sent for the particular track. So if the interface has 12 inputs, then you would make sure that this particular channel is going to be sent, that when you plug into input 1, it may by default go to if you plug into input 1 on the mixer, by default it may go to input 1 on the on the actual audio interface if it's a multi-track USB driver. A lot of mixers just have a stereo driver, so you may just have to say, I want to take this channel and I need to send it from the mixer to the USB output. Sometimes that requires hitting a button on the device. So if you have that where it's going out to the USB device and you have the correct input from the USB mixer driver configured here, at that point you would add an audio track and we could just choose the inputs from here that we have the microphone connected to. Or if you wanted to just add an audio track, you could choose the inputs from right here. So you'll see inputs over outputs. So we want to define the input where the microphone is connected. And if that's all going well, you're still not hearing anything, you want to make sure that the track is record enabled and that you have this little button for monitoring. So make sure that the monitoring is on and then it should work. So make sure that your mic is getting into that it's getting signal as you expect, getting into the Tascam interface. Make sure that that's being sent not just to like the headphone outs, but to the USB output. Go into Cubase, make sure that you tell Cubase to look for the Tascam as your audio interface so you tell Cubase to look for it there. You want to tell Cubase what input that the audio is coming from. You want to add the track and select that same input and make sure that you have record enable and monitor turned on. So I know it sounds a lot at first, but this will become very second nature. Once you kind of get it set up, you'll be able to do it in just like 2 seconds. Okay, so we have Henrik, who's kind of transitioning from Cakewalk of 25 years, and if I many things in Cubase complicated. So first question is, how do I make the cursor always return to where it started from? So go to your preferences and go to transport. Let me just find it. So transport, and then you want to say return to start position on stop. So at this point, I'll hit play. And then with hitting the space bar, it'll just go right back. So once again, just go to your preferences, to transport, and just check return to start position on stop. Okay. So Jazz Dude wants me to just mention, just probably in conjunction with using, where we had imported all of the audio files over to a project. And if you have files that are resident in different folders and you wanted to consolidate them, how to do that. So if you wanted to consolidate, you could go to Media, and then you could just choose Prepare Archive, and that will move all files that are residing and stored and saved in different folder locations. That will move them directly into the project window, or into the project folder rather. Okay, so we have a question from Ted Springman. So thanks, wonderful to have you on the live stream, Ted. Can you please review cycle recording with multiple high Z guitar takes and comp into one master take? So I have something kind of similar with bass. It was done with high Z input. Let's see if I have it in my list here. All right, I'll just open it manually. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. Okay, so in this project, I recorded multiple passes. I put it into a cycle recording, and I have multiple multiple takes here. They're all kind of stacked on top of each other. So if you kind of hover over and you see these kind of diagonal lines, that means that there's audio that resides underneath there. So I want to take this particular file here, and I wanted to see all of my different takes. So I just kind of put it into record for like 8 measures, and I let it go like 5 or 6 times. We could then do what we call show lanes. So we click here, and then we can see all of my different performances here. So as I just wanted to select all of these files, so let's say I'll just get rid of this quickly. So this will be take 1, and then if I wanted to switch to take 2, I could just click, or to a different take. So, but if I wanted to take different takes from each take, what I could do is, again, select the comp tool, and I can say, I like this part from that take, that part from that. And if you wanted to audition, when you have the comp tool selected, if you hold down the control or command key, or if you wanted to, reapply a different edit, so you can say, now I just wanted to cut, you could hold down the Alt or Option key as we do this. And if I close the lanes, this is now a result of all of the edits that we've done on the comp. So as soon as you do that, go to Show Lanes and use the comp tool, and then you could select different takes. And then even if you wanted to slip and slide a take, like to have different parts within a comp, say, oh, I just want to change the rhythmic feel of this, you could hold down the Alt and Control keys, or Option Command, and that will allow you to slip within the comp part a different performance like that. Okay, so we have a question. Back on my DTS project, can't begin to explore the front and back stereo. Okay, can I begin to explore the front and back stereo with 4 outputs of a UR44C? Will I be able to send some tracks to outputs 1 and 2 and others to 3 and 4? So yes, definitely. So that's why often, people would have an audio interface with multiple outputs. So all you'd have to do is, there's a couple ways of doing it. So if you're doing something that's surround oriented, some people will just say, okay, we're going to have stereo 1, stereo 2. So you could do that. You could also just, if you have just 4 outputs, go to your audio connections, go to your outputs, and you wanted to add a bus, and we could say, I wanted to make it quadraphonic. And then this way you could say, okay, these are outputs 1 and 2, and outputs, I just have 2 outputs in my interface here. So I'd say, okay, we want mix left, or so. And then as we have a track that's routed to a particular, instead of this going to stereo, we could send this to our quadraphonic output. And when we go to edit, we can now move the tracks and place it in a surround format. This won't give you an LFE or won't give you a center channel, but you could experiment with doing surround. So you would take outputs 1 and 2, probably for your front speakers, outputs 3 and 4, connect those to your rear speakers, and then you could start mixing in quad. So, and a lot of like post-production projects will be mixed in quad, especially like for composers. They'll often mix all the music in quad because they don't touch the center channel, because that's where all the dialogue lives. It's a kind of a no-no. So just kind of, once again, add bus and add a go under more and add a quadraphonic bus. And then you could start experimenting with surround with your UR44C. All right, so Michael Pierce is pointing out about 40 people haven't smacked a like button. You know what to do. All right. So just see Michael Pierce talking about our debreathing. Says the only debreath plugin I've used as an insert, I think, added so much latency to the project it was irritating. So, all right. Okay, so we just see why do so many of these macros need the nudge one frame command? So I use that a lot because so why I have that kind of set up as a nudge one frame is when you use it in conjunction with the event. So let's say if I'm here and I wanted to select the event itself. So I'll just copy something over here quickly. Okay, so let's say if I'm here and I move my cursor. So let's say if I move my cursor is here at the beginning of this frame and I have a preference set for auto select events under cursor. So now if I nudge over by one frame, so I'll open up my nudge palette up top. Okay, so now as I nudge, let's say without that event selected, and let me just see if there's a okay, so I'll assign a keyboard shortcut for that. Okay, so let's say if I come here and now when I go to the next event with that set, that it can automatically have that event selected. So sometimes as you move to an event, it could that way it could trigger the auto events as you kind of need to navigate within a macro. So that way you can move and select the event just because it's over the event. So that's why you see nudge plus one frame just to move it. So that often within a macro, you may need that to trigger an event being selected. So that's why you often see that being utilized within macros for that particular function. Okay, so we just see from Christian D68. I love this range selection for CC adjustments. I learned it last week from Greg and use it every 20 minutes since then. That's great. That's why we do these live streams, just to make sure that you've done it. You can get the most out of your software and be working smarter and faster with it. Okay, so we see Millard Brown has been able to join the live stream, so thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Christian D68 just kind of asking about speakers for what speakers to use. So he's saying he has Yamaha HS7s for front, and if he wants what suggestions for rear speakers. So if you could get kind of the same speakers, that's always ideal, or at least the same family. So I mean, the HS7 is a great set of speakers. What I have, so many people, and I remember talking to Alan Parsons about this, and he's a strong proponent of having, 5 of the same speakers for your surround mixing, so that, if you wanted to kind of treat it equally, early days, people may have put just like a little bit of information, but if you're putting kind of full range material, a lot of people would choose to use kind of the same brand of speakers. And that's why like the Yamaha HS series that you have are kind of sold individually, so that you can have 5 and then 5 of the same speaker, as opposed to buying them in pairs. But you have 5 of the same speakers and have one subwoofer. But if you can't do that for financial reasons or space limitations, keeping it within the same family would be, a better solution than switching different companies. So you have one pair of one company's monitors in front, a different in the rear. So I have, for my 5.1 setup, what I've had for 20 some years is NHT Pro. And there are kind of 5 of the same speaker sizes. It's worked out well. See that everyone's missing Michael Teams not being on the live stream and giving away ice cream. So all right, so we see, hi Greg, while the notepad is floating, could you please add a lock to this? We'll ensure that you cannot accidentally delete written text. Yeah, so we discussed that on the last live stream, so it will be passed on. All right, so Gareth is passing on ice creams from Michael Teams for everyone. All right. So what would Artist 11 have that 10.5 Pro doesn't have besides Squasher? So it's a rhetorical question, and of course Greg was precise. So just you could check out some of the different, it's going to be probably some of the MIDI editing functions, like the global tracks in the editor, editing of the MIDI CC data, stuff like that. That's not going to be carried over from that was added in the version 11 generation. So. All right, so we have a question. Kindly tell us about Very Audio 3. Okay. Okay, so let's say if we have, I'll just revert this so that. All right, so Very Audio 3 is going to allow us to do tuning for vocal or kind of like solo instrument material, like, voice or saxophone, bass. So not stuff that isn't playing chords. So we could double click And we'll take this into kind of the big editor. And as we go to Very Audio, so we see a lot of people like this song. All right, so let's say. So we could, this will do an analysis of our vocal. And we'll kind of break it almost into like a MIDI. So if I wanted to do like quick tuning on this, you know, we could see our time. And as we look at this, we could just say, okay, I want to go to, there's two different ways of smart controls. I usually like to see all of the smart controls, and we'll show you what we can do with this. So say we're doing vocal tuning, I could select. So if I have a chord track, one of the things you could do is actually see, I could colorize based upon the chord track so that we can see elements that are out of key, so which are red, elements that are within the key, which is kind of this aqua blue, and elements that are, you know, within the chord from the chord track, which are green. So if I wanted to just select these particular notes here, I could go to the bottom center and quantize the pitch and just move the pitch. And that was okay. So we're able to do that. Now, if I wanted to just change the vibrato on different words, we could do stuff like that as well. So I go to the upper center. So if I wanted that vibrato to be minimized. That was okay. Guess all along I was so naive. And let's say, like, as we work with this, where she... So let's take a listen to this phrase here. And let's say maybe the pitch had, you know, so if I wanted to, you know, this is kind of one word that drifted flat. So if I wanted to, I could just go to the bottom, and now we could just kind of take the edge here. So I could grab kind of the edge and bring that up. And if I wanted to bring that up from a very specific point, I could grab just this little diamond at the center, and I could now just drag up from that particular point. If I wanted to, you know, sometimes transitions between notes can be really critical. So if I wanted to regulate the vibrato here, but I wanted to maintain kind of the transition, all I'd have to do here is I could see this little triangle. I'll make this larger. So when you see this little triangle, at that point, I could, as I adjust the vibrato, it's not going to affect the transition of the particular notes. And if I wanted a note to change the formant or to adjust the volume of notes, we could do that as well. So formant in the lower left-hand corner, and our volume in the lower right-hand corner. And these are all addressable over here as well. But now with Very Audio 3, we have this functionality to kind of do it all, you know, from kind of smart tools. If I wanted to, you know, enable MIDI input, I could just come right over here and just play from my MIDI keyboard the particular pitch. We could also choose to have a MIDI reference part. So if I, let's say, have a piano part and I wanted that as kind of a reference, I could just say, okay, we're going to just take, let's see if we have, so at this point I could see what pitches are actually in the MIDI that I could use as a reference. So that's some of the great things you can do with Very Audio. So it's very fast, very easy, and again, it's totally integrated, so you don't have to change kind of, you know, key commands. It ties into your undo history, so lots of great advantages. All right, so we got Matt Elliston checking in from London. So he's enjoying the live stream. He's saying lots of great questions. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. So thanks for the awesome advice, much appreciated. So the question is, I've just pre-gained my tracks to leave headroom, but how do I raise the volume, loudness of tracks without decreasing headroom? I'm new to mixing. So it's always going to be a balance of gain structure. So, sometimes people will, let's say if we're on the mix console here, so let's say if we do kind of the full mix console, there's a lot of people that will go into the racks and adjust kind of pre-gain. So, this is one way where you could, get an additional 48.2 dB of, very clean gain before it hits the channel. So sometimes people will jack this up and compress it really heavily just to kind of add a whole other gain structure. So, really just kind of play around with the gain structure. So, use kind of the pre-gain. So, and it says, so how to raise the volume, loudness of tracks without decreasing headroom. So, as you kind of are raising the tracks, it, kind of will be decreasing headroom. And you'll find that as you get into more mixing that, it's like combining different tracks, the arrangement, often like, tuning a vocal can make it fit better in a mix where it's not having slight, kind of sonic, harmonic conflicts with stuff. So when stuff's like really in tune, when stuff's really arranged, those things can make a big difference in your mix as well. So it's not always about the actual gain structure, but, try to get as, so, as you do increase your overall volume, you can lose headroom, and it's always kind of finding a sweet balance. And it's, people will find, will spend a lifetime trying to find that right balance. Okay. So hello, Greg. Is there a way to add an instrument snapshot as a track picture? This question was already asked, but did not receive an answer. So we answered this in a couple of live streams ago. I did some research on it, but let's go ahead and show where the volume, where it goes. So let's say if I add let's say my groove agent, or I'll just add a new instrument here. All right, so let's say I'll add this as an instrument. Okay, and I'll just go through different presets. All right, so let's say this is what I want for my snapshot. So I'm going to take a snapshot. All right, so that puts that snapshot here in the actual for the plugin snapshot, so we could use that. So, but if I wanted to now use that as my track picture here, what you could do is this will be saved. So let me just close this out. And let's go over, and I want to add a user. And what we do now is come over here, and I'm going to just say, let's import. And it'll be placed on a Mac. It's going to be under Documents, Steinberg, VST Thumbnails. So that's where it's going to be saved to. Let me just import. So this is the one here. So that's the one we just did where we closed the middle part. So now I could just come right over here, select that as the thumbnail for that particular track. So it's going to be under your documents folder. And then go to Steinberg and you'll see VST thumbnails. So and you could change the name of it right after you take a picture. All right. So you see Jeff Sabelski was able to take advantage of the Nuendo promotion. So it says thank you to Yamaha and Steinberg. That's great. Glad you're enjoying your Nuendo. Okay, we have, hi Greg, can you change the color scheme in editor window for instruments so piano keys would match their color throughout editor, as now black piano keys have lighter color and white ones are darker. All right, so if you wanted to, let's say we look at this in our key editor. Okay, so let's say as we do this, so here in this editor, you could actually see that the white keys are, and we'll just kind of zoom in here. So you can see that kind of the dark keys are darker. But if you wanted to change the appearance of this, we go to Preferences, to Color Schemes, and then you'll see Editor Area Background. And let's say if I just wanted to come here, let's make it brighter. And hit apply. If I did this right. Oh, that's my cycle region. Sorry about that. I did it wrong. So I would just change my editor background here if you wanted this to be brighter. So you could adjust there so the contrast is a bit more. But in the Very Audio editor, I think it's reversed for some reason. I've mentioned that to them. But now if you wanted to see your key editor like that, or if you wanted to just go to your defaults. But as we zoom in, you can see that the white keys are lighter in color than the black keys on the piano. But if you wanted to change the color as well, you could do that. Okay, so we have a question. How can we link the groove, feel, and tempo of an audio track to a MIDI track? Example, drum track. So let's take a look. All right, quickly revert this. Okay, so let's say I have a drum loop here. Let's take a listen to it. All right, and let's say if I have a MIDI drum pattern. And I wanted to drag this over. Okay, so let's say now these two aren't lining up. So, and what I want to do is apply the feel of this and apply it into this. So what I'm going to do is just double click, we'll go to our sample editor. Let's find, we'll just select our hit points, and I'm going to say create groove. This will now add a quantized preset. So now when I come, I could choose to quantize using this preset that's been extracted from the audio. So I'll say quantize the MIDI, and now when we listen to it, so that went from just having this, so we'll go just play a little bit of it so you can hear. And if we undo the quantizing and redo the quantizing. So just come over here and, figure out the hit points, click on create groove. It's going to show up in your quantize presets, and then apply that groove quantize preset to your MIDI part. All right, so we see a comment, I really do think Cubase should be the standard. So, we have lots of people who use Cubase. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer saying, thanks for the tips on comping tracks, Greg. Pick up so much to make it a smoother process. That's great. All right, and Gareth is saying, time for a like-a-thon. All right. Okay, we have a feature request. Is just to put the awesome channel strip in a lower window instead, or use as an alternate to have it as a floating window over regions. Yeah, so I've kind of wanted to maybe have like a super channel view of everything that you would see in a channel in the lower zone, but I'm still kind of lobbying for that. So, but I'll pass on your comment, and coming from a customer usually has more weight than coming from me. So. Okay, thanks for all the wonderful questions. All right, so we see Cubase Junkie is going to be leaving in a minute to get crawfish. All right, good for you. All right, so we have a question from Douglas. Is there a way to do a search in the live chat here for a word or name? So if we get lost when the chat jumps, we can refer back to where the question was when Greg was answering a certain question. I will try to make sure and let people know if I've lost questions. Sometimes my chat field, I kind of keep it behind as I'm going through. But if I lose questions, I'll let you know that I've lost questions. But I'm not sure if during the live chat, I think it's only so much of a buffer. You could probably search for it afterwards, but I never kind of search for, I have a lot of kind of, plates to spin to do the Hangouts. I don't do search, but maybe someone else could comment. All right, so we see a question. Can you rename parts only? All right, so let's say if I have this particular event here. So if we go to the name, so if we select this, let's say if I come here, I could just select the event and you'll see the name for the event as opposed to the track name. So that's really kind of all you'd have to do. I type so well. So we can see the name on the events right there. Okay, so we have from JVI says, not per se a Steinberg question, was arguing with VST quick controls and track quick controls with my complete NI S61 keyboard, especially with regards to the 8 knobs on the keyboards. All right. Yeah, so I think, so I'm not sure if, so let's take a quick look. So I think we could use kind of the same for let's say my track quick controls. I think I have my CC121 hooked up. So let's come over here real quick. So I think you could have them be the same. So my CC121 goes into like a quick control mode. But if I come here, when I go to like a VST instrument, all those parameters are set. So, but let me know if you have more of a question with that, JVI. All right, wonderful to see Greg McCarty. He's a long time attendee. So, Greg, I answered some of your questions on the transport and the quick controls in, I think, the last Hangout or maybe the one before towards the end. So, in case you missed that, but we did go over when you emailed them in. Okay, so I see maybe okay, it says further comment on JVI with the track quick controls. Got it working perfectly with the Halligan 6 instrument, but if I load an NI instrument, the 8 turning dials get automatically assigned like Halligan VST quick controls, but the track quick controls no longer work function. Any help or ideas? So it looks like maybe and I don't have an NI controller, but maybe the keyboard itself, when a NI plugin is instantiated, that it's kind of automatically mapping. So it's kind of doing that, and it's taking precedent over. It's kind of maybe grabbing the MIDI CC data. So I'm not sure. I know some controllers will have maybe alternate, like you could hit like a bank for the 8 knobs. So maybe you have one that would be kind of like assumed by the NI software when you open up the controller, and maybe you could have a second bank that's assigned for quick controls. So maybe there's a setting like that within the controller. So, but I could do some more research if you want to email me, but I don't have a NI controller, so. All right, John Costigan is saying, since Michael Teams isn't on the live stream, that we have to post kind and generous remarks about Teams. He'll never know. So I think we should all give Michael Teams ice cream. So since he's been very generous this year, donating ice cream and his very creative ice cream flavors to everyone. So when he comes, we'll give him like at least 100 bowls of ice cream. Okay, so we have a question. Been trying to bake in Very Audio changes via bounce selection, but when opening a new event up in Very Audio, changes aren't baked. Is this a bug or is there another way? All right, so if we have, we'll show you how you could do this. Okay, so if we do our Very Audio and we now want to do our changes, what you could do in the functions is just to flatten real-time processing. So again, choose flatten real-time processing from the functions menu. All right, so we see Sable Winters is going to take up her Texas roots and stand in for Michael Teams and donate ice cream to people. So. Okay, so we see Capital Razors join the live stream. Thanks for joining us. So I see a comment from Jeff Sabelsky is like deconstructing rock songs on YouTube. Easy to find things out of tune at times by themselves, but gives character to the overall sound. I can hear when very audio kicks in and a lot of commercial stuff, icky. So yeah, with any tool like quantization or very audio, you don't have to use it, be subtle. But yeah, there's a lot of tracks that when you listen to, like there's a lot of Led Zeppelin tracks that aren't in tune, but they're still great. Okay, so we see Greedo Kenobi's learning lots of cool tricks here today. Thanks again, Greg. You're welcome. Thanks for joining the live stream. Greg just got Nuendo, opened up a complex project with many Hallian Sonic 3 tracks. And is it my imagination that Nuendo may handle CPU use differently than Cubase 11 Pro? It seems so after 24 hours of use. So I think it's going to be identical. So I haven't noticed any difference. But if you do find something, let me know. Okay, so we see from Gareth a suggestion for a preference to option to auto snapshot new plugins when opened. So yeah, I'll pass that along, but it could be hard to know when the first time you open a plugin is versus when it's just being opened. So you may not want it to take a snapshot every time. Okay, and Jazz Dude is posted the Windows path for the VST track thumbnails. It's going to be under in your application data folder, roaming Steinberg cache / track picture thumbnails. And so you can do it on your user account. So thank you, Jazz Dude, for doing that. And we see Sable Winter saying, wow, thumbnails. So. And Gareth is saying it could be just a background setting. So. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Thanks in advance. Is there any possibility to tweak at the same time the same two plugins inserted in a row on a channel, i.e. two compressors, insert 1 and 2? So let's take a look. All right, so let's say if I wanted to just take this drum loop. Okay, so let's go ahead and put two compressors on it. All right, so I know generally we could link between different tracks, but not necessarily on the same track. But let me see if I could do it. So I have my CC121 controller, and it does have an AI knob with a lock. So let's say if I wanted to adjust, let's say my ratio on this, so I could lock that. So if I have a hardware controller, I could come over here and adjust this one with my mouse and adjust one with a controller knob. And let's say if I do it maybe via quick controls. So I will remove all my quick control assignments, and let's say learn. And let's say if I go to ratio and plug in 2, to learn. So if now that these are assigned to quick controls, sorry, let me just click on learn for the ratio here. So now when I go into quick control mode, I could use two controllers, like knobs on my MIDI controller, to adjust both parameters at once if you wanted to. So you could do that. Yeah, so that's how you could, so you could do it through quick controls quite easily, and just kind of, click on the L button and then click here, move the parameter, and that will assign it into the quick control slot, and you could save that as a preset if you needed to. So let me know if that works for you, 2R Studios. Sable Winters wants people to hit the like button. All right, so we have Terry Dean checking in from the Netherlands. All right, PMO Sullivan is saying, wow, Cubase is mind-blowing. All right, reading through comments. All right, so Douglas is saying Insight quantized MIDI to audio groove. That's good. That's a good trick. Right, we see Jeff Sabelski has used the Hallian 6 wavetable synth to scare away ants in his house. So that's good. Bonus. And Millard Brown is going to be leaving to get a pickup for a Rickenbacker 330. Good fun. So you see, will there be a Cubase 11.5? So they haven't announced anything, but I'm sure that the developers and all the the team at Steinberg, all the ladies and gentlemen there, are working on things right now. So when they come out with a new version, they're already working on the next version. So it's nonstop there. So it's pretty impressive pace of development that they've been doing at Steinberg. All right, so we see Douglas has got to go vote in the Charlottesville primary. So I'm going to be voting after the live stream, so I could vote in my primary as well. So thanks for reminding me. So I was looking forward to doing that around 5 o'clock. Our polls are open till 7. Just seeing Terry Dean is in our discussion with the NI controllers. He's indicating that the NI controllers have multiple MIDI interfaces. You need the NI MIDI DAW interface to map the Q controls and use the transport bar functions. So kind of like I thought, which might be the case. Okay, so I just see, hey, after update Cubase 11.0.2, there's some content missing at the media site, but when I open the instrument, they are there. So if you could let me know, like sometimes if you could let me know exactly what particular content it is, this is from Mindspitter Official. If it's in for what instrument, that would be helpful. So I just see a question from Jeff Zabelski. Greg, did you ever have experience using the strange matrix of the Vienna solo instrument sets? So I didn't have any of the Vienna instruments personally, so I don't have much experience with them. And we see Space Crawler has Michael Team's absence figured out that he's playing with his CC121 controller he's been waiting for so patiently. Okay, so we have a question. How do I get Superior Drummer 3 to show up in MIDI? It is stored on a separate drive. So, it's going to show up as under MIDI plugins, but you want to go to, first of all, your VST plugin manager. At this point, you want to go select your VST instruments and make sure that it's going to be, that if you see it here, if you don't see it, I think it's still a VST2 plugin. So if you click on the little settings cogwheel, you want to click on the plus sign and add the VST plugin folder where the DLL is. So, the samples could be on different drives, but you need to tell Cubase where to look for the plugin and which location. Once you do that, click on the refresh. And when you refresh, then rescan the disk. It'll go through and should be able to find a plugin. But make sure that you have the plugin path. And if you don't see that again, just click on the little settings cogwheel here, and then you should see the plugin path. All right, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. And once again, if you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. All right, let me just see if I've maybe gotten to the end of the discussion. All right, so I know we had some people that had sent questions in advance, so let's go ahead through some of those. Okay, so we had a question that was sent in, how to save mix console channel settings from one project and apply them to another project. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Okay, so this is often used when we have like projects or maybe if we're thinking of like, a workflow of recording on like a tape machine going into an analog mixing desk and how to make that work. So, where basically you mix one song and then you play kind of the same tracks through the next, from the next part of tape. And then you want to have the mixer kind of restore its state. So what I want to do is I'm going to select all of the channels here in my project. So let's say we have this going on. And we look at this in our large mix console here. Okay, so if I wanted to save these selected channels with all of their EQs, all of their inserts, everything kind of just dialed in, what's the best way to do that and apply it to a different project. So sorry for hitting the mic. So what I want to do is just come right over here. We see this little drop down menu and we could say save selected channels. And I'll just call this rock mix. And I will save it just to my desktop. So now if I wanted to do a new project, so let's say we have 14 tracks. Let's do new project here. So I'm going to add audio tracks. We'll make it 14 mono tracks. And now when I go into my mix console, and I'll select the channels here. So we'll load our selected channels. Let's go to our rock mix. And now all the EQs, everything has been transferred over for us. So if we want to kind of start with the same kind of set of, mix settings, we could just save that as kind of a channel, kind of like a mixer snapshot that could be loaded up into other projects very easily. Okay, so we had a couple questions. One is the stationary cursor jerks along, whereas page scroll moves smoothly in both Cubase 11 Pro and Nuendo 11. I don't remember it doing that in earlier versions. I can't use it; it gives me a headache. But I used to use it all the time, so I haven't really noticed any difference with, especially previous versions. But let's say if I wanted to take this and I'll select all of my events and just let me duplicate it a couple times here. And let's say as we're playing. So there's two different modes for this to work. So one is like when we get to the end of a project. So say if we're here and when we get to the end, that we'll see kind of the waveform redraw. And you can see kind of how fast that is. And there's also a different mode where we could say, let's make this stationary so that the waveform is constantly moving. So if we zoom in and out here, we can just see that. So that seems to be kind of drawing pretty well. If you're on Windows platform, the one thing that it might be that, may cause some additional, issues with kind of constantly drawing, because it's drawing a lot of information. And this used to be, ironically, how like some early DAWs, the tricky part was when you got to the end of it drawing the waveform quickly. So like when it would do this transition to the next part, that's when it would be really hard. So early DAWs, to kind of mitigate that problem, came up with like the stationary cursor so that you could just gradually kind of redraw in with an expected way. But that could cause a lot of graphics issues, especially on a high DPI. So if you're on a Windows platform, try going to your preferences, and under general, you'll see enable high DPI and also different high DPI scaling options. So see if you're on Windows and if you have that checked, if that changes the display behavior for you. So it sounds like it could be like a high DPI setting. All right, another question was mailed in. How do I find the name of the equalizer preset that I loaded for a vocal track? And he was kind enough to attach an image. I don't want to have to copy and paste it from one project to another. The two of them on the left are a Cubase EQ preset with its own name. I want to find them under that name for future use and for my own understanding, rather than save them as my own preset, which is what I've done in the past. Okay, so, and I think this is in the pictures that were attached. We're kind of dealing with the EQ here. So it doesn't really, we could select the presets here and have those applied to it. But once the EQ has been loaded as a preset, I'll just take a look, see. I don't think that there is a way to see what actual preset was loaded, that it's indicated anywhere. So it will load the preset, but it's not going to show what the preset name is. And what you could do is just to, copy, right click, copy the EQ setting, go to another track and paste the EQ setting. So that's one method. Another thing that some people will do that you could do to kind of mitigate this, to remember, is as you add the preset, is maybe just to have it in the notepad of the project as well. So if we come to, the notepad area, you could say, EQ preset, bass, low, mid, punch, whatever the name of the preset was. So you could leave that as a note when you add it. I know it's not the greatest solution, but that way you could, 10 seconds or 5 seconds of typing could save you 10 minutes of searching for that EQ preset in another project when you're doing that. Okay. So in our question, can you give me an idea what the differential is in update costs between Cubase 11 Pro and Nuendo 11 for the approximately 6-month minor updates and its yearly updates? Also, the leap to major new versions like 11 to 12, when that happens, it will be $50, $150 each time, or even more for Nuendo updates. So every time is going to be probably slightly different pricing, but we'll take a quick look. And I'll show you, because it's kind of geo-targeted, so it'll show you what the update costs are in the US. So let's take a look, and you may have to just kind of check. Just come over here quickly. All right, so let's say if we go to Cubase, and we'll just come over here. We'll say buy Cubase 11 Pro. So we can say, okay, updates and upgrades are $99 for going from from 10. So here we can see it's about $99. That's from 10.5, and let's check out what it was for Nuendo as well. So update from Nuendo 10. So that was about $200. So generally the Nuendo might be a little more expensive because there is, significantly more features. But it also, there's different promotions that are constantly going on. Like you can see kind of Nuendo promotions going on throughout the year as well. So that will give you an idea. And you could check if you're in a different country, you could check what the pricing is just by going to the Steinberg website. Okay, so we had a question. How to add a short sysx string to send before a bank select message is sent to an external MIDI device. If not possible at the bank change level, is it possible to send it at the time of the program change is sent for a given MIDI device? So depending on the device, so what you could do, generally sysx is going to be kind of independent data, but if you wanted to add sysx data, and this is often where you could kind of maybe capture different banks of sounds or like the state of the instrument that could be recorded. So I'll just add a MIDI track, and let's come over here, and we could do this in the list editor. So I will just select the MIDI event. Let's go to the list editor. So at the top, we can see if you wanted to insert notes, controllers, program change, and here we could add sysx. So once sysx has been added, you could grab the pencil tool, click, and so we could add the sysx event at this particular stage. And here you could put in the sysx message. You could import it, export it. So at that point, the sysx information could be stored and recorded just as a MIDI event, and you could place that MIDI event before the project starts, and that could work, so if you wanted to do a sysx dump of patches, you could have the sysx dump as a MIDI event here in Cubase that could load up the appropriate patch bank, and then you could send the bank and program change to work within the state that correlates with that sysx. So have the sysx play back. One thing that could throw you off when dealing with sysx, because it could be a lot of MIDI information that's being sent down, the MIDI cable or USB cable, is to make sure that when you come over here to get the MIDI filter, that sysx will be filtered by default. So make sure that it is unfiltered. But just, again, go over here to your MIDI event, go to the list editor, and now switch this field here to sysx and drop it in. And at that point, click on the comments, and you could, type in the sysx values or just import it from like a .sysx file and have that within the actual event itself to recall the correct state of the instrument. All right, and another question was, is it possible to add a sysx command to the text file directly from the patch script file? Example for group and bank definitions, we can add like G1, G2 sections. Can we add a sysx section? So generally the script file is going to be just the bank and program change information. So it's not going to be part of the patch script file, but you could have different patch script files for different instruments that correlate with the sysx, and you could actually store that as like a track preset if you wanted to with sysx data, or just save that particular track as a track archive with different sysx dumps. Okay, so those were the questions that were sent in. Okay, let me just scroll back to our live feed here. All right, so just see from Vincent Simpkins. So thanks, Greg. I can't wait until you come back to Charlotte. Sam Ash, Kevin Odom says hi. Well, definitely tell Kevin. I please send him my best. I hope he's well. So I miss going down to Charlotte. So hopefully one day I'll be able to kind of travel again and see everyone in person. But trying to be, trying to help out as many people as we can. But yeah, please pass on my best to Kevin. All right, so we have from Christian D68. Usually I use external instruments to record MIDI, and then I send it to audio channel to record it. Once I have the audio channel, I can add all the effects I want. But is it possible to have the effects applied in live playing? So yeah, what you could do is just come over here. Let's go to... if you have your audio interface with enough inputs, you can go to your audio connections and go to external instruments. So let's add an external instrument. So let's say, okay, we have a Yamaha montage. And so let's say we go over here. What we want to do is to basically tell it, okay, it's connected into these inputs of my audio interface. All right. And once we do this, I say, okay, let's add an instrument track. So we add an instrument track and we go under external plugins, and I can say, let's go to my montage. And now as I play, this instrument is going to be able to run through all of my EQs and all of my effect plugins as a normal audio track without necessarily having to record it first and then add the audio. So if you wanted to hear the effects while you hear the effects from software while you're actually playing the instrument live, you could just set it up as an external instrument. And again, that's under your audio connections and select external instruments there. All right. Now, according to Agent K, he's showing me a glass of milk, La Leche. So it was from Pablo. So. All right, so we had a question. Is there a way in Cubase to remote a K-Oscillator Pro, which is only using CC commands and no MIDI keynote information? Seems the keyboard needs to be transformed into MIDI CC. Is there a way? So I'm not real familiar with the K-Oscillator Pro, but if you just need it to a part that will just send... I'm just going to reread it one more time. So it's only using MIDI CC commands and no MIDI keynote information. Seems the keyboard needs to be transformed into MIDI CC. Is there a way? So a lot of keyboards, will have knobs on it. So if I just wanted to add a MIDI track, so I will just move a bunch of knobs on my Nectar controller here and put it into record. And so I have faders, some knobs. So when we look at what's going on, I didn't record any notes, but we did record lots of MIDI CC data, and we can see this pretty easily in our list editor. So, so if you just record MIDI CC data, it will just capture that. So you could record a MIDI part that doesn't have MIDI notes, that's just full of MIDI CCs with, you know. So let me know, Daniel, if that works out for you. Okay. So if possible, this is from Christian D68, if possible, it would be nice if you make a short review on the tempo track and musical modes possibility. Okay, so I'll just do a new project here. Okay, so let's say we have musical mode for MIDI or loops. So I will all right, so let's say we have one drum loop. Hang on, my son is knocking on my door. Hang on just 1 second. Okay, sorry for the interruption. So let's go back to our musical mode for loops. I'll do this with MIDI and audio. So let me just find a quick MIDI loop. Okay, so let's see if this makes any sense musically. Let me just. Okay, so and let's go ahead and add a tempo track. Okay, so we have different ways that loops can work. So right now, this is set in. I could take this event and have it not be in musical mode. So if we listen to just the tempo, of the event here. So I'll just turn on the click track rather. So we'll have this playing. And I will say we'll start over. So let's say I have my MIDI loop. All right, so if I change the tempo, generally the MIDI will automatically follow by default. And we see that as I change the tempo that my drums are going to kind of change how it's fitting into bars. Now, if I didn't want my MIDI to follow those tempo changes, I could place this into linear mode. So the track level in linear mode. So if I just change the tempo now, it's playing back and it's not in sync. But if I place this into musical mode on the track, whatever tempo I have, it's automatically going to play back in time. So I could do that for an audio track, but for audio, I could also take the events themselves and place the event into musical modes. Right now, this isn't making any sense because this is playing at its original tempo and it's not matching the tempo. So I'm going to place this into musical mode. And now these two tracks will follow whatever I do in the tempo change here. So as I make a change here, both the audio and MIDI will just speed up and slow down because they're in musical mode. And if I wanted this to just automatically, from the tempo, put it into ramp, say, okay, just want it to ramp down. So this will just kind of change in tempo. So that's, so again, if we could have the track levels for events, and for audio events, the audio events themselves can be in musical or linear mode. And that's how, so musical mode, it will follow tempo changes. Linear mode, it stays at the same position in time. Okay, so we have a question. What is the easiest way to open the same project? Now I close Cubase and restart it. I know if it was pretty easy, but now I open multiple projects. Okay, so what's the easiest way to open the same project? Now I close Cubase and I restart it. I know. So if you wanted to reopen the same project, so the thing I do in a lot of my live streams is just use the revert command. So if you wanted to open and close it, let's say you made just a bunch of horrible changes. So let's say if I jump over to this project where maybe I've done different changes and I wanted to go, instead of closing it and then reopening the project again, if I wanted to open it at a different save position, you could also, which you could do, but just try going to File menu and then just hitting revert, and this will take you back to the last saved status of the project, and you'll be kind of right back to where you were. So you could give that a shot. All right, so we have a question. Can you please show how to send program change message with bank selection? I'm on an Integra 7, so I'm not sure what bank messages the Integra 7 does, but let's take a look at it. So let's say we add a MIDI track, and we could see your bank changes and your program selection here. So you could adjust your bank messages Now, sometimes you may have to, depending on the instrument, you may find that, the old trick, because you have 16,000 values in your bank change message, I believe. So sometimes, some devices you may have to do intervals of 128. So like bank 1 may be 0, bank 2 may be, bank 128, bank 256, bank 384. So you could do stuff like that. And if you wanted to put in a specific value, you could, again, go to the list editor. And if you needed to put in like an MSB, LSB, just insert, let's say your control chain, so controller, and you can say at this point I want to insert bank select your MSB, and I think we go to 32 for your LSB, and you can put in your various values there in addition to inserting a program change for the appropriate. So you could try that. You could see if Roland has, patch scripts for the Integra or like a VST instrument editor as well. Okay, great to see that Kai Wen Franklin made the live stream. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to download a MIDI device script for the new YC88 keyboard to be used as a device manager in the control panel? So yeah, you could do it. I'm not sure. I could check with some of my colleagues at Yamaha. One of my friends makes a lot of patch scripts for Yamaha products that get included inside of keyboards. So if you if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I can see if he has a patch script available, but sometimes they're often available on the Yamaha website. All right, Sable Winters has stepped up her game in honor of teams, creams, honey baklava, and pistachio ice cream for all. That's well done, Sable. All right. All right, so we just see from Christian D68, does anybody work with a Roland Integra 7? I get it to work, but not as an internal VST. Not able to add audio inserts and send. So, it's not going to work as an internal VST because I think it's just an external instrument. So again, just like we showed a little bit earlier, just go to external instruments and define, add an instrument connected to your audio interface, and then you're able to access that particular instrument. So say you want to go to add an instrument track, and you'll see it under external plugins. So, and then you could have access to the different instruments. And, because some of them, many instruments, all the sound is being generated externally. So hook it up as an external instrument. Okay, so we have a question. Hey, is there a global notepad that could be used to take notes for an entire project? The track notepads are excellent, but I can't seem to get a global notepad. Thanks. Okay, so if you just go to your project menu, you can see notepad here. So I'll just show, I think I have a project that has project notepads as well as a global notepad. So I'll jump back to this project here. Okay, so when I go to the notepads for different tracks, I could just see, okay, we have our notes here for our different tracks. Okay, like drum loop, we have, tambourine to add more rhythm. So we see these notes, and these notes can also be visible directly, in the mix console. So if we wanted to go to like the large mix console, we could see these notes here. But there's also just a project notepad that's independent. So here I could see all of the notepad data here. So I know that there's not a lock on it, but so so I could see like all of my different types of track information here. So here I just put like, name of the song, the composer, what the key tempo is, copyright information. I put the lyrics in here so that we could have it as a reference that could be stored with the Cubase project file. Now, if I wanted to combine my global notepad with all of my track notepads, all I'd have to do now is choose to go to my file menu, and then we could export notepad data. So we'll just come here. I'll just call this June 8th notepad. Okay, so now that I've done this, I can see my global notepad. And then as I come over here, it will actually include the name of the track and all the track notepads for notepad data for all of the notes there as well. So once you do an export, that could be just a simple text file that you could pass on to anyone else in the project, or put on your G drive or a cloud drive, and you could always have access to that, or store it in the project folder as well. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, when using the chord track, the voicing of the chords going low to high increasing by every bar. Also, when I drag the chord track to MIDI, the note is going up. All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so I'll just put in quick chords here. All right, so now we'll just kind of play this back. Okay, so let's say, and we could adjust kind of, the chord voicing. So let's say if we come over here, you could, adjust kind of the lowest root note range if you want it to be triads, or if you want it to be 4-note chords, 5-note chords. So if I just say I want it to be triads, I could now, as we have this selected. So when we look at this and drag it down, but you could also have the chord voicings kind of on, the track as well. So if you wanted to follow the chord track, you could also adjust the voicings internally. So you could say the lowest root note. So you could do stuff like that on the individual tracks as you drag it over. But now we don't have 4 note chords. So if I just wanted to play this, so try adjusting some of the different voicing options that you have. And you could also just, turn off adaptive voicings, but just kind of click here on the setup voicing. That should give you a lot of options. All right. Reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Again, if you learned something, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. So just see Greg with external instruments has many Yamaha keyboards, but not my P80, which is a great keyboard. Even my dad loved and used it, but only one Yamaha P something. So is there a P80 model available? So I will see if it's it could be sometimes, the patch scripts, if I remember the P80, it's kind of more of a performance piano. So I'm not sure if there's, sometimes we have patch scripts that are done, by different companies. And sometimes if they have, 12 sounds, they may not bother to do patch script, but I'll see if there's a P80 one that's floating around somewhere. And if you want to email me, Jeff, just to remind me. Okay, so we see a question: will there be any upgrades / cross-grade discount after Nuendo's 40% off? So, generally throughout the year, I think if you kind of look at what Steinberg has been doing, that you'll see, there's almost like monthly promotions. So, there's Absolute 4 previously. So, there's generally kind of monthly sales activities and sales promotions going on. So. Okay, so we see Christian D68 just saying thank you, Greg, for the tempo review. It's clear now, so that's great. All right, so we see Michael Pierce is having to go, so we'll see you on Saturday. So once again, just a reminder, instead of our usual Friday live stream, it'll be on Saturday. So if you do have friends that maybe haven't been able to attend because of work commitments or other commitments, the change in day, you may want to let them know if they want to join the live stream. Okay, so I see another request for like a Yamaha CVP 70. So I'll check with my friend as well. All right, we're happy to have Graham Witcher join us. Okay, so we see Christian D68 saying, wonderful notepad export in top 10 of the day. Sable Winters is giving Graham. He's had a hard day, so condolences about your loss of your friend. But Sable has generated a very appropriate ice cream flavor to help out. So thanks for joining us. All right, and we see that Agent K is on top of it with some moderation. Agent K and Jazz Dude. Thanks, guys. We appreciate it. All right, so we see the notepads was combining the text, the notepad for tracks and a global notepad is John Costigan's revelation of the day. All right, seeing a couple feature requests for notepad. I'll make sure to pass along. All right, so we have John Kasanga from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for joining us. All right, so I think I've reached the end of the live stream. Let me see if there's... All right, so Sable Winters is saying, I've learned at least 5 new things today. So I'll wait, see if there's any other questions. If not, we will maybe wrap up a little early. And we will continue once again on Saturday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Okay, so so just see a quick question. What time is the live stream Saturday? So it's going to be 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, so kind of the same time that we see here. So just see, hi Greg, sent an email, but no reply from Faceless Production. So if you want to just remind me what the email was, so we may have covered it in the live stream. Okay, so I just see, hi Greg, how do I install the patch script I got from your friend in Wisconsin? So I think you probably, so the patch scripts, I think, and it could be slightly different. I know you're on Windows, John, if memory serves me right. But if we go to like your preference, your application data roaming folder. So if we come over here, let's go to, I think if we go to library, and then this in preferences, but you would see like your application data folder in Steinberg stuff. So you would see, okay, Cubase 11. And then I think if we go to, you'll see kind of folders where you can see, I think we'll see patch name scripts here. So under scripts, and then you could just see patch names and you could just drop it into the inactive folder, but you could just drop it right into that folder. And so you go to like your application data folder. So if you go to like your Windows start menu and we see Cubase, I think you're on 10.53, set that, and then you'll see open application data folder, like where instead of starting the program, you go there and just go into the presets, and then you'll see scripts and patch names. Okay, so I see from Faceless Production, so about the Melodyne bug. So I will try to recreate that. I kind of loaded up my version of Melodyne again, so I'll see if I could get that to be recreated when you have lots of different edits that we're losing. So, all right. So it looks like maybe we're okay. We'll see if there's any last minute questions, but if not, we'll wrap up a little early and I'll get to go hang out with my son, and hopefully my time getting everything for the index. So look for the index again in a few hours. I'll start after dinner and we'll get that going. And we will again on Saturday at 1 p.m. So if you have friends that, it's a great time. If you had friends that haven't been able to attend a live stream because of work obligations or something like that. So we'll see if we get some new faces for Saturday's live stream. But I want to thank everyone for the great questions. Again, if you learned something new, hit the like button. Or if you want to subscribe to the channel, if you haven't done that, and if this is your first live stream you attended, thanks for joining us. And we will see everyone on Saturday. Please take care, and we'll see you this weekend. Goodbye.